September 11th, 2001, a morning that turned into hell. The world watched as two towering giants collapsed in seconds, claiming thousands of lives and shaking the heart of the United States. 3,000 people dead, thousands more injured. But beyond the casualties, it was a declaration of war. And within less than a month, America prepared its response. Their target, the terrorist networks of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Their battlefield, a foreign land known as the graveyard of empires, Afghanistan. But the first strike didn't come from thousands of troops. It came from just 12 men. Led by Captain Mitch Nelson, 12 Special Forces soldiers were sent in first, covertly. They weren't just soldiers. They were war gamblers risking their lives in Taliban territory. No backup, no guarantees. And this is their true story. Mitch Nelson had just returned from deployment. A decorated Green Beret, now back home with his wife and daughter, hoping maybe to catch his breath. But when the towers fell, so did the idea of rest. Duty was calling again, louder than ever. He didn't hesitate. While the nation was still grieving, he was already pushing his way back into the fight. He wasn't alone. One by one, his old team reunited. Some had moved on, some had families, but they all knew if America was going to hit back, they wanted to be the tip of the spear. They each had their own way of saying goodbye, some with brave smiles and some with silent tears. One hugged his wife a bit longer, as if trying to freeze time in that final embrace. Another kissed his wife without saying a word, because no words could carry the weight. For these men, war wasn't just about courage, it was about sacrifice, leaving behind a home, to protect it from a world away. They didn't promise to return, only to give everything they had trying. At Karshi Khanabad, known simply as K2, a barren Soviet-era airbase in Uzbekistan, the 12 men were flown in under complete secrecy. Deep behind Allied lines, 2 men were called in. Just Captain Mitch Nelson and Chief Warrant Officer Hal Spencer. This wasn't a casual briefing, not of skill, but of resolve. Across the table sat senior commanders. Their objective? To form an alliance with General Abdul Rashid Dostum, a powerful Northern Alliance warlord who knew the mountains better than anyone. 12 seats were cleared, 12 rifles were readied. And Operation Task Force Dagger was officially a go. Together they would launch a surprise offensive, piercing through Taliban defenses and reclaiming the strategic stronghold of Mazar-e-Sharif. But it wouldn't be a traditional assault. The plan was to fight alongside Afghan cavalry on horseback and use laser pointers to mark enemy bunkers and tanks, feeding exact coordinates to circling B-52 bombers overhead. Each of them knew this wasn't just another mission, this was history, and it might cost their lives. No turning back now. The Blackhawks were waiting. One by one, they packed light, knowing they'd be outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off. The helicopter thundered across the Afghan night sky. Inside, silence had no place. The Special Forces soldiers were laughing, tossing jokes back and forth. One even burst into song.
Upon their chest, these are men.
A nervous energy filled the cabin, masked by brotherhood. They weren't fearless, but they knew. When fear creeps in, it's the bond between them that keeps it at bay. They knew the ground below wasn't just a destination. It was a place where it could all end. And that's why they refused to sit still. Armed and surrounded by the shadows of night, these 12 men had finally landed deep inside Afghanistan on a mission to strike back first, and everything was just beginning. Before they could even adjust to the silence, figures emerged from the shadows. Local people, rugged, armed, suspicious. They weren't enemies. They were the men of General Dostum, warriors forged by decades of tribal conflict and Soviet occupation. After trekking across barren lands and rugged hills, the 12 American soldiers finally arrived at a remote encampment. There they came face to face for the first time with the man who would become both their ally and their greatest test, General Abdul Rashid Dostum. Dostum didn't greet them with a smile, but with a piercing, unreadable stare. Captain Mitch Nelson, young, untested, and determined, introduced his team. Through a translator, he explained their mission: to support Afghan fighters in defeating the Taliban and retaking Mazar-i-Sharif. Dostum looked at Mitch as if weighing his soul. He replied bluntly, "We are not American soldiers, we are warriors. We don't need rescuers, we need brothers willing to die beside us." Without delay, Dostum divided the team. 6 men, including Mitch, would ride with him into the mountain, to the hidden stronghold known only as the Dead Cliff. The other 6 would remain at a safer position with Dostum's 2nd unit. The Cliff of the Dead isn't just a name. It's carved into the side of a rocky mountain. No walls, no gates, only faith and weapons. Mitch begins to strategize with Diller about surviving alongside Dostum. The scenario is simple. Dostum will point out the Taliban's location, then Mitch will rain fire from the sky. That afternoon, Mitch stood beside Dostum, overlooking a valley under Taliban control. They had a clear view of the enemy stronghold. A line of armored vehicles, mortar guns, and dozens of armed Taliban fighters stood guard, alert and ready. He unrolled a worn-out map over a rock and pointed to the area he believed to be the enemy's command center. Target coordinates: 34 degrees north, 67 degrees east. A massive explosion rocked the ground, but as the smoke began to clear, they realized the strike had missed. The bombs landed a few hundred meters off target. Without hesitation, Mitch grabbed his binoculars and began descending the slope. His men covered him from behind. Step by step, Mitch crept closer to enemy territory, ducking behind rocks and bushes. The Taliban spotted movement. The crack of AK-47 fire echoed across the cliffs. Mitch pressed the radio to his lips, panting, and called in, "New target." This time, the bombs struck dead center. Second attack. Airstrikes tore into the mountainside. Fire and smoke shot straight into the sky. This wasn't just a hit, it was a message. The war starts now. General Dostum didn't wait. Dust still in the air, he charged full force. His riders hit the valley, guns blazing, cutting through what was left of the Taliban. But he didn't see it coming. The Taliban had reserves, heavily armed fighters coming down from the ridgeline. And just like that, Dostum's momentum started to crack. No time to think. He grabbed his gear. Mitch was furious. He couldn't believe what just happened. To him, Dostum's move was reckless, almost suicidal. Charging into battle without a clear plan had nearly cost them everything. To Mitch, it felt like Dostum was still holding back, treating this as his war alone. But Mitch and his team were deep in it now, and they needed to trust each other if they were going to survive. Later that night, Dostum finally laid everything out. What had seemed reckless earlier now made sense. His charge wasn't just an attack, it was bait. He'd wanted to draw the Taliban out, to see exactly which route they used to move their reserve weapons and fighters. And now, that path was clear. It was a bold strategy. By identifying and cutting off that supply line, they could cripple the Taliban's ability to fight back. As the pieces started to fall into place, Mitch began to understand Dostum's thinking. With this new clarity, Mitch shared the plan with the rest of the team. They weren't just reacting anymore. They had a target, a plan, and a way to win.
Jesus, we didn't get all of them.
The third airstrike didn't go as smoothly. Despite the assault, the Taliban still managed to slip through using hidden supply routes, but the fog was starting to lift. It was becoming clearer now. If they wanted to shut the Taliban down for good, they had to destroy that narrow pass behind the ridge. That was the key. That's where the enemy's main supply network ran. And cutting it off was the only way to take out their war machine. But before that final strike ever happened, a crack had already formed. The US had quietly deployed another team into northern Afghanistan, but they weren't just reinforcements. They were sent to align with General Atta, Dostum's longtime political and military rival. To Dostum, this wasn't just strategy. It was betrayal, a direct blow to his pride. When word reached him, he looked at Mitch with a cold, distant stare. Mitch tried to explain it was a top-down order, not his own choice. But Dostum wasn't interested in reasons. In his eyes, Mitch had walked away, abandoned the fight. And just like that, the bond they had forged in battle was severed. Left with no other choice, Mitch and his team decided to move, alone. They knew the risks. Without Dostum's fighters, they were a small unit going up against an entrenched enemy guarding one of the Taliban's key supply routes. But time was running out. With the final objective in sight, they rode hard across the rugged terrain, heading straight into the heart of danger. The narrow pass behind the ridge, where intelligence pointed to hidden stockpiles of weapons and ammunition, became their target. Some of them surrendered, shaken by the fire raining down from the sky. The shock of the bombings had broken their will, at least on the surface. But in scattered corners of the battlefield, resistance still burned. Taliban fighters clung to their ground, launching desperate counterattacks on Diller's team. Caution remained the only option. Surrender didn't always mean safety. These were men raised to embrace death, not fear it. And no one truly believed that a Taliban soldier would simply give up, unless he had something else planned.
Stay sharp.
Just when the pressure reached its peak, out of the rising dust, Dostum appeared. He came not as a general, but as a warrior keeping his word. The arrival of the Dostum did not improve the situation at all. All the teams were under pressure. Even crazier, the Taliban had a missile launcher that launched 48 rockets continuously. In that situation, Mitch then tried to ask the bomber team for help, aiming at the missile. This request was quite dangerous because it wasn't directly coordinated and could miss. But that was the risk he had to take.
Copy 595, but we are not authorized so close to you.
Sure enough, the missile launcher was still intact, but the attack paused momentarily. Now Mitch, mounted on horseback, made another bold decision: to attack the remaining Taliban who had escaped the bombing on horseback. Mitch, Dostum, and everyone else joins the attack on horseback, moved by Mitch's bravery. Mitch was hit by the explosion, but that didn't stop him. His body was still able to shoot and finish off the Taliban in the middle of their red zone. Meanwhile, Dostum didn't waste the opportunity to hunt down Taliban leader Razan, the man most responsible for terrorism in Afghanistan and the world. The war wasn't over, but their mission was complete. Amid the ruins of the enemy fortress and the silence that hung in the air, Mitch and Dostum, two men from completely different worlds, divided by language, culture, and beliefs, but united by one thing: honor on the battlefield. As Mitch and his team finally returned home, they left behind more than just footprints in the Afghan desert. They left a legacy that trust and respect can grow even in the middle of war. And Dostum, he continued his fight for his homeland. But forever he would remember this, that once in a brief yet decisive moment, a group of strangers came, not to conquer, but to fight beside him as brothers.